Hey battlers, and today we are jumping back into the Silph Arena for the next two metas of Season 5 of Silph. Now we have the March meta over here, the Ionic Cup, and the April meta over there, the Polkadot Cup. And in this video we are going to be going through both of them. All the timestamps are going to be down in the progress bar down below if you want to skip to one meta in particular. But this video we are going to be going through both. Now, worth noting though, that there are going to be Go Battle League move updates from March 1st, presumably. And those haven't been announced when I'm recording this, and we won't actually get the stats until they actually come into the game on March 1st. So I'm going to leave a pinned comment. It'll be the top comment down below with any changes to these two metas based on the move updates from Niantic. So with that in mind, check the pinned comment just before we get into it. But yeah, let's start off with, well, we've got two whitelist metas on our hands. One that is a little bit smaller than the other one by about half, but let's just jump into it and talk about the Ionic Cup. So Ionic Cup is a little bit team building, a little bit whitelist in that we have some different specifications, some different groupings. First off, every team has to have one Electron. So there are 6 Pokemon there. It is Ampharos, Raikou, Minun, Luxray, Electivire, or Dedenne. Every team has to have one of those, and there are definitely ones that operate a little bit better than the others. Now, optionally, options slot 2 and slot 3, you have the option of bringing in one Proton and one Neutron. You don't have to, but the options here are the Protons are Beedrill, Poliwrath, Ariados, Hisuian Sneasel, Celio, and Barbaracle, and then the optional neutrons are Umbreon, Sableye, Skuntank, Munchlax, Drapion, and Greedent. Now, you don't have to bring one of those, and if you do, then slots 4, 5, and 6 based on these 30 Pokemon down below, but you can also use these 30 to fill your Proton and Neutron slots as well. So just keep that in mind as you're sort of building a team, but I'm going to tell you now, you are probably going to want to opt to bring a Proton and a Neutron, so it's probably a moot point that you have the option to sort of run away from this. But yeah, with that in mind, we're not going to go through the 30 Pokemon because I think it's a bit easier to just jump into the Meta Simplified infographic, and you know, you can go ahead and look at the actual list on silph.gg/ionic if you'd like to, or it's right there on the screen. Now let's get into the Ionic Cup. No thumbs up smile needed because the thumbnail is probably going to be different to that because we've got two metas going on. But on the main graphic, we have 3 main groups over there. We have the fighters in the top, and then in the bottom left, we sort of have the bulky tanks, neutralists a little bit, and then in the bottom right, we have the anti-fighters, is essentially how I'm going to characterize that. So I guess you could say that the bottom left, is the bodyguard group. So jumping straight in the top, we have Pinsir, Beware, Hisuian Sneasel, and Poliwrath. Poliwrath and Hisuian Sneasel are 2 picks in the Proton slot, and between these two and Beedrill, I think that most people are going to be picking their Proton out of those because they are all really, really powerful. We also have Beware and Pinsir as sort of options that you can run if you don't want to use your Proton slot on them, or if you want to use your Proton slot on Beedrill, then you can still bring in something that sort of fills a similar role by bringing in Beware and Pinsir. And these guys operate pretty similar to how you would expect. Poliwrath in particular is going to be pretty similar to Ember Cup. I think that a lot of people that played in January are going to be pretty familiar with how Poliwrath works. And just like Ember, my recommendation for moveset is probably Scold and Dynamic Punch. Scold gives you coverage over Hisuian Sneasel, who is really high on the PvP rankings, but probably works a little bit worse in practice just because it's a bit of a sim hero, I guess, is the point of Hisuian Sneasel, but it is very powerful because it does have that fighting poison typing that doesn't, it's not weak to a lot, and especially not a lot in this meta. But Poliwrath with Dynamic Punch hits the sort of neutral dark types, the normal types for big damage, and then Scold gives you coverage over Hisuian Sneasel, and then also a fair chunk of the rest of the meta as well. Hisuian Sneasel actually also has some moveset options. You can run X-Scissor, Aerial Ace, or Close Combat, and all 3 of those moves have move cases in this meta. So X-Scissor is going to hit things like Malamar that isn't on this main graphic, but also dark types like Umbreon. Then you've got Close Combat, which does big hecking, huge damage to neutral, to grass types, to normal types and dark types, and just everything in between. And then Aerial Ace gives you coverage over the other fighters, including other Poliwraths and other Hisuian Sneasels. So I'm not sure which moveset is best, to be honest with you, and I think we're just going to have to find out once we see what teams people are bringing. But we're a little bit different in running Stomp, but it can beat Hisuian Sneasel, and then Pinsir is just a fighting type, a bug type that has the fighting type move Close Combat, so works kind of similar, but also has that bug damage that can land onto those dark types as well that are pretty powerful. Now, I think we'll just pivot straight to the bottom right, where we have this sort of oddball collection of Pokemon. We've got Luxray in there, Politoed, Beedrill, Milotic, Nidorina, Sableye, Golisopod. Not much groups them together except for the fact that they are beating those fighting types. So different ways here. I've got things like Beedrill and Nidorina that are mainly here because they have ground type damage that do super effective to Hisuian Sneasel, which is nice to have that sort of coverage in there. Beedrill has the added benefit of also having X-Scissor, so we can fight back up against dark types as well. But then Nidorina, otherwise, it's sort of Nidorina's main purpose, so I'm not sure if Nidorina is going to be a big, heavy hitter, but it is an option for sure. Also got things like Luxray, who has access to Psychic Fangs, so obviously big damage to those fighters, especially Hisuian Sneasel, with the double weakness to Psychic. Golisopod has access to, I think it's Aerial Ace. It's definitely got a flying charge move that's relatively quick, especially with Fury Cutter, so obviously that's going to be good up against the fighters and also the bug types like Pinsir. And then Melodic, Dragon Tail damage, just sort of neutral coverage, and it ends up doing pretty good up against all four. And then Sableye as the Pokemon that only has the one weakness in Fairy and doesn't care as much about that fighting damage coming its way, just generally able to do a pretty good job, pretty decent job up against the fighters. But, there's no Psychic type fighters here, so it isn't as powerful as something as like Sableye in the Hoenn Cup, for example. Then in the bottom left, you have the Pokemon that are sort of around to counter these guys. So Umbreon and Greedent. Umbreon is an interesting case where it's going to be running Psychic in this cup to fight back up against the fighters, but then also hit things like Nidorina and Beedrill, and just otherwise able to, at bulk, just take a lot of damage and output a fair bit of damage back and able to sort of overwhelm Pokemon. That does a pretty good job in that. Also resisting Shadow Claws from Sableye. Actually, Golisopod generally going to be running Shadow Claw as well. I guess there's moveset options in there, but if Golisopod's running Shadow Claw, then it's going to be resisting that damage as well. Greedent coming in a little bit different. It's just sort of a bulk fiend, and it's just sort of able to power through a lot of these matchups with Body Slam, Spam, and Crunch with the optional, or the attempt at getting the debuff, the defense debuff, which you can definitely swing some matchups for Greedent that can be pretty powerful. Munchlax, again, it's just sort of bulk and being able to output enough damage to take, it's really just a race, and the bulk is sort of a very consistent factor in this meta, and I think that bulky Pokemon are going to be pretty big. And then, which is why I've got a fair few of them hanging out in the safe swap zone. And then we also have Electivire, who again just sort of out damages. It's not as bulky, so it's sort of a case where it's a bit more of just a glass cannon, I guess. It's got Wild Charge, Ice Punch as the sort of moveset I was sort of playing with in PvP. It does have access to Flamethrower as well, which kind of acts as a different nuke that you can use instead of Wild Charge up against Beedrill and Pinsir if you don't want to go for the defense debuff. But Electivire is so squishy already that I feel like it's just, you may as well just go for the Wild Charge and, lose the defense, and one charge move is going to be enough to take you out regardless. So I'd sort of just err on that side of caution. Now, again, you have to recontextualize all of this with the Electron, Proton, Neutron sort of team building requirements, where you can only bring one of Hisuian Sneasel, Poliwrath, Beedrill. You can only bring one of Umbreon, Greedent, Munchlax, things down there like Drapion. So you sort of have to play around a little bit in what you think your team needs and what other Pokemon are in these groups that can sort of fill those roles as well. And then it comes to the safe swaps, so things like Drapion, Skuntank, Lapras with big bulk, Seeking with Icy Wind, Drill Run, really powerful moveset in this meta. Ariados can take things as well. Raikou with the option of getting that Shadow Ball off onto basically the entire meta, plus Wild Charge onto things like Umbreon that would otherwise resist it. It really rounds up this meta in a way that I feel like it's going to play out very not RPS, which I'm really into. Not RPS. I mean, I'm into not RPS. But there's other things like, Alolan and Raticate in this meta that sort of just other Pokemon that are sort of like a little similar to things like Umbreon that are outside of the Proton, Neutron, Electron sort of team building requirements. and does give you those options as well. So I definitely recommend taking a look at the PvP Poke rankings, take a look at the full Pokemon that are available, just to see what you might want to run instead of these main Pokemon. Electron is honestly a weird slot where I feel like it's just getting a glass cannon on the team. Dedenne is a little hard to bring in my mind just because there's so much poison running around. But maybe that poison is going to be like very limited to, Beedrill and the dark poisons, which are sort of a little locked into the, the team building slot. So maybe it's not going to be as common, and Dedenne is going to come out as powerful. But I feel like the big options are going to be Electivire or Raikou. With Raikou coming out for me a little bit ahead of the pack, just because that Shadow Ball seems kind of nice. But there's definitely other options in there. If Poliwrath becomes like the ultimate fighter, which I think it very well might in that Proton slot, then Minun's going to be pretty solid there with access to Grass Knot. But yeah, it's just going to be a bit of a game of wait and see how teams develop, and we'll see how it all goes. But this is a pretty quick one on my end, but this is sort of my first look at the Ionic Cup, just to give you a bit of an idea about what we might start to see. And of course, hopefully I'll have some coverage of an early Ionic Cup soon to give a better indication about what the teams are actually looking like and what Pokemon might be all important. But yeah, that's enough about the Ionic Cup. So we're going to move back to that other graphic and take a look at the Polkadot meta. If you are dipping out and going to come back to this video later, leave a like on the way out if you can. Now, let's go over and take a look. There we go. Click. There we go. Polkadot Cup. So we'll bring our head over back this side. And the Polkadot Cup is kind of similar in that it's a whitelist of 100 Pokemon, except it is based on egg groups from the main Pokemon game. So Pokemon that lie in the bug, fairy, field, and flying egg groups, which if it's not a sort of concept you're familiar with, doesn't matter. We'll just take a look at the whitelist. Well, we won't. I'll just show you my infographic that's got what I sort of feel like are the best picks and how they're going to line up. But of course, the full 100 Pokemon are available on silph.gg/cup/Polkadot if you want to review the entire meta. Because there are definitely some Pokemon in there that are less than useful. We'll just put it that way. So there's definitely some absolute trash that you will not see unless someone's trying to get the Pandemonium badge for their trainer card. But let's bring up the Polkadot meta. Hiya! And here we go. So we've got 5 groups on the graphic. One group that isn't so much a group, but it is definitely a really powerful Pokemon, probably one of the kingpins of this meta. So let's sort of go through what we've got here. In the top left, we have the Poison Fighting group. So you have Hisuian Sneasel, Seviper, Beedrill, and Beware. Right next to me, we have the Psychic move users. I want to say Confusion users. But we also have Arcanine with Psychic Fangs, alongside Oranguru, Girafarig, and Swoobat with Confusion. In the bottom left, we have the Fire type. So we have Rapidash and Pyroar standing pretty solidly, like very similar stance. And then also Talonflame backing them up. Bottom middle, we have Galvantula again, who I think is going to be a massive pick in this meta. And then in the bottom right, we kind of have a selection of anti-Psychic types in Samurott, Zangoose, Ampharos, and Araquanid as well. Sort of bunched in behind that Araquanid. But yeah, let's just start talking about it. So I think the fighters, Psychic type users are going to be one of the biggest sort of interactions in this meta, and makes both groups really powerful Pokemon. So Beedrill obviously are going to have a little bit of playback as well, because it has access to X-Scissor. So even though it takes huge damage from Confusion by virtue of taking super effective damage and also being a bit squishy, it is able to throw back some X-Scissors. Or Fell Singers, I suppose, although that isn't the big damage. X-Scissor at least does a bit more damage. Had to fight back up against the actual Psychic users. But, Arcanine comes out and... Drill Run does a lot to Arcanine, but the Psychic Fangs come out pretty quick, and so are able to do a lot of damage there for sure. You've then got sort of Pokemon in the bottom right that are made to sort of bodyguard the fighters a little bit. So we've got Samurott with Hydro Cannon, obviously really hurts the Arcanine, but also has the Mega Horn to do the big damage to the Psychic types. Zangoose has Night Slash. Araquanid is, bug all the way. It's got the Fury Cutter Bug Bite combo. And then Ampharos coming in with the Brutal Swing moveset as well. Really just add some extra coverage in that regard. Galvantula is almost similar in that it's hanging around as Psychic type counter, but it also does really good up against that top left group of the Poisons plus Beware. So Galvantula is a little bit of a core breaker for the Psychic fighting duo. in that it sort of really does beat both. It has a little bit of trouble here or there. It actually does beat Arcanine in the one shields, which I thought that it was going to be like, well, you know, Galvantula's going to be good up against the Confusion users, but Arcanine is going to be a little bit too much for it. But no, Galvantula can force its way through that matchup as well in pretty solid fashion. And that sort of leaves Galvantula's main counter being the fire types in your bottom left with Talonflame, Rapidash. You know, there's other Pokemon as well, like Typhlosion, that can sort of fill a similar role in having that Incinerate damage, because these are all Incinerate users now. I forgot that actually picked that moveset up. Well, Pyro had in the latest move update, I think. But they're sort of your bringing them in as counters to Galvantula, sort of their main role in the meta, because they're then going to generally lose to the fighters, although Talonflame has more play than the others with access to Brave Bird that can just nuke stuff out of the sky. I mean, Rapidash has Drill Run, I think, as well, which can definitely play back up against the poisons. But then they're also going to be losing to the water types down below me, the Araquanid and the Samurott. They don't do as bad against Zangoose and Ampharos, even though the arrow is sort of going that way towards them. But, you know, Ampharos definitely does a pretty good job, especially against Talonflame. Although, I guess, charge move-wise, Ampharos is probably going to be running Brutal Swing. There's probably room to not run Focus Blast in this meta and run something like, you know, Zap Cannon instead. But we'll wait and see what sort of... Thunder Punch would be the more likely option on Ampharos. There's definitely some moveset decisions here. But then the fighters generally beating the fires sort of bodyguard the Galvantula a little bit. So you can sort of see there's a lot of sort of crossplay going on. There are some other picks in here, you know, and I checked the whitelist as well, because this is just sort of my first look at what we sort of might start to see. And once we sort of get closer to April, which is quite a way away, we'll get a better idea about what the meta picks are, whether Niantic drops some major move update that is going to, like, you know, maybe Araquanid has Draw Run now and it's going to be able to fight back up against Galvantula pretty well. We'll just have to wait and see what Niantic has in store. Again, check out the pinned comment down below. But this is sort of my overview of the two metas for March and April. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, especially that subscribe one. Let me know what major pick I've missed, because there's usually one that sneaks through that I've just happened to, you know, completely just blindside and wasn't aware of. I think Celio hanging around, you know, could do some damage. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below. And of course, thank you to my patrons and supporters on YouTube as well for being absolutely fantastic people. And I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you over the next year in bits and places. No announcements yet. But, you know, I'm sort of waiting for Niantic and the Pokemon Company to announce some dates, which maybe they're announced by now. Nah, they won't be. Maybe in a couple days, maybe on Pokemon Day, we get some announcements. But yeah, we'll see how it all goes. And with that said, I will see you in the next one. This has been a pretty long video for my Meta Simplified standards, especially when compared to the Ionic Cup one. That was like less than 3 minutes. But yeah, bye.